Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for tuning in. John Kelly, profiler here, and welcome. Welcome, Delphi. I'll tell you, boy, there's been a lot of carrying on about Richard Allen up in Delphi and if he's innocent or guilty. Our show today is pretty much focused on, Richard Allen, and is he guilty as charged? I believe he is, and I'm going to go over some of the reasons why. At this point in time, I want to send our deepest condolences out to Libby and Abby and their families and friends. I can't believe this nightmare is not over yet, and it's still being kind of regurgitated through the courts. I feel for the family. I feel for all their friends. I mean, this is some pretty sad stuff. And, it seems like the powers to be just won't let it end. Okay. If you like what we're doing, please give us a like. And of course, subscribe. We love your subscriptions and comment. We want to hear what you have to say here. Right, wrong, or indifferent. Okay. What I have to say here is my opinion, and that's just the way it goes. I'm going to start it off, and I'm going to take you guys back in time a little bit. When Richard Allen wrote his letter to the judge asking for assistance, he needed financial assistance, remember. He didn't know what to do. He needed an attorney and he didn't know which way to turn. So he asked the judge for help. Nowhere in that letter pleading for financial assistance did he say he was innocent. Now, that may not mean a lot to you, but it means a lot to me, because if I was accused of killing two little girls, and especially if I needed some kind of court assistance or financial assistance, I'd make it upfront and personal to the judge that I am innocent. Okay. And there's nothing in there about that in that letter that I've seen. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. We looked at it pretty good. Supposedly, the day of the murders, he declined lunch with his mother and father. Now, again, these are all allegations. And he bought himself a 6-pack of beer. He says he only drank 3 bottles. Then he was up hanging out on the trail. I'm very curious about these 3 bottles of beer. I really am. I mean, definitely the alcohol can become an uninhibitor. And we do know that alcohol certainly can make people act out pretty strange in some pretty strange ways, in angry ways, sexual ways, many different strange ways. Alcohol is a big uninhibitor and influencer. I have a problem with the 3 bottles. Okay. I got a feeling maybe a little bit more than 3 bottles. We'll see. Time will tell. Now, he was put in protective custody. It was not a punishment. It wasn't like he was thrown in the hole or something. It was for his protection. I understand when he went into protective custody, he had a tablet. He had people checking in on him. There's a lot of talk here about solitary confinement. Solitary confinement can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. In my mind, it's not like he was over in some foreign country and he was in solitary confinement and laying on a slab on the floor or something like that. All right. We know a number of people that have been in solitary confinement, and it's his solitary confinement seems like, a day at the beach compared to some of these other guys that we know. Right. So he had a tablet to listen to music, keep him a little busy. I've interviewed people who have been in the hole. They've been in the hole. Okay. This is real solitary confinement. Okay. You get a room, you get a cell, you go into your cell, you have 1 bunk. Okay. Along with that bunk, you have a toilet and you have a sink. Okay, and you got some blankets on the bunk to keep you warm. You are in your underwear, and people are keeping an eye on you. That is not protective custody. Okay, the hole is for people who are being punished. Richard Allen was in protective custody. He was not there as part of his sentence for punishing. This was not about punishment, is the point I'm trying to make. Okay. While there, he makes multiple admissions. One admission, I wanted to rape the girls, but I was so scared. So I killed them with the box cutter. He was scared, he says, because he saw a van. Now, again, these are allegations I'm going by. Okay. But I think I'm pretty much right on. All right. I wanted to rape the girls, but I was scared. So I killed them with a box cutter. Now, let me tell you something. I've talked to a lot of people, a lot of killers in prison, and I got to tell you something. This is just not something that becomes an admission in some kind of protective custody or some kind of punishment through solitary confinement. Okay, usually this deal's cut way before time with the prosecution, that if they're going to be open and honest about what they've done, they're going to get cut a break, right? So, I just think, this guy got hit with a guilt complex and needed to get this stuff out real fast, just try to save his soul, as I think he may have mentioned that he felt he couldn't be with his wife and kids now, but he could be with them in the hereafter if he did the right thing. Something to that effect. Again, allegations, okay? And only my opinion. He made countless opinions in protective custody that he was responsible for the girls' murders. Now, this is the first time I have ever run into that. I want you to all know that. In all these years, okay? Usually people just don't come flying out with that. And, my tablet isn't working or something, or I'm having a rough time here. Now, don't forget, he's having visits too. People are showing up, buddies, some kind of buddy system to make sure that he's okay and he's not hurting himself. So, I mean, it's you got to understand, this is not punishment to me, that he's being punished in some kind of extreme solitary confinement. This is more like protective custody today. He's being treated decently, although he may not have access, to general population, but still in all, right? He also admitted that he was only eating his feces and urine, drinking his urine and everything, because, he was acting. He had acted. He had acted, so that's why he was doing it, okay? Again, first time I'm hearing about a guy in the hole, okay, or a guy in some kind of, protective custody acting like this, all right? And just so you understand. He also admitted that he was an alcoholic and a sex addict, and this is important to me, okay? Because we always believed from the beginning, when we were involved in the Delphi case, when we were looking at it and going over it and constantly talking about it, that we were after a sex addict. Okay, we believed it was sexual right from the jump, and that's what we were completely focused on. Now we hear he's claiming he's an alcoholic and claiming he's a sex addict. An alcoholic that only had 3 beers. I don't know too many alcoholics only have a few beers. Very possible. Very possible he could have a low tolerance, but his admission speaks volumes to me. He also mentioned battling depression and anxiety. I can understand that for many different reasons. That could come from a lot of different places. His defense talked about the Odinist and a possible sacrificial ceremony with Libby and Abby. I got a problem with that all the way. You know why? Because what we do whenever we get involved in anything, any kind of investigation to look at anything, all right, we look at the before and we look at the after. So we don't see any kind of sacrificial murders before Abby and Libby. nor do we see any sacrificial murders after Libby and Abby. So I have a hard time with this. I mean, usually these types of people are very obsessed and compelled to follow through on, some kind of ritualistic sacrifice. I don't believe that I see any evidence of sacrificial murders, like I said, before or after Libby. Before they were murdered. There's nothing to prove this at all. This is what I believe hearsay, and this is what pops up a lot of times. We get into various scenarios and theories, and lots of times they don't hold water, but they make a good story. There's a lot of focus on law enforcement making mistakes in this case. Well, I got news for you. Usually, in pretty much any investigation, there are mistakes. That doesn't mean you're going to hear about them being mistakes, because they don't want to admit it. They don't want it out there making mistakes. Would you? So they try to keep it under wraps. But just because mistakes are made, and, there might be some technicalities kind of broken, does not mean the person is not guilty. You have to separate that. Separate the mistakes from the person's guilt or innocence. Because it doesn't mean he's guilty, and it doesn't mean he's innocent. Okay? Bottom line here, Richard Allen was convicted by a jury of his peers for murdering Libby and Abby. That's the bottom line here. There's always mistakes made, pretty much in any case, little ones, big ones, whatever, But again, what does that have to do with the murders? One way or the other, the bottom line is that he was convicted of murder, and he is a murderer at this point in time. It's the job of LA, of law enforcement, and I give a lot of credit to Indiana law enforcement. It's their job, to follow the physical evidence and not hearsay. Okay? And that's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. And that's what they did. That's what they did. How do you find, this cartridge in between Libby and Abby's body? Now, come on. We had two dead girls out in the middle of nowhere, but they just happen to have this cartridge in between their bodies or underneath their body. Okay? You got to understand, and they've turned around, and law enforcement totally believes that this was ejected from one of Richard Allen's weapons. I believe it's totally criminal that the families of Libby and Abby have to endure the pain and suffering of their deaths all over again. I think this is, completely criminal. I think it's horrible. Horrible. And various people have various reasons for keeping this moving, keeping it alive, keeping it out there. Okay? Some reasons that they have, may be pure. Okay? And it's part of their job as defense attorneys or whatever. But I think there's a lot of other people trying to get attention and clicks based on the pain and suffering of Libby and Abby's family. I really believe that. I believe that they want to believe that they're, that Richard Allen is innocent. If we want to get to the bottom line here, there's much talk about, the FBI and everything, but what the bottom line here is? If we go right to the source of it all, From the very beginning, if we had a person up there in law enforcement that he was even a minimum wage filing clerk who could file things in the right place, okay, we would have not been, going through all that we've gone through over the years, okay? Because doesn't it all boil down to something being misfiled? I mean, if that wasn't misfiled, that statement wasn't misfiled from Richard Allen, I mean, wouldn't they have been on him a heck of a lot sooner? But it was misfiled. And because it was misfiled, we have these years of wondering about a serial killer walking among us, especially you folks living up in Delphi. It had to be horrible, the trauma you endured. You have the FBI in and out of the case. You have the state police involved. You have countless hours of investigation taking place and millions of dollars being spent because of something that was filed in the wrong file. And thank God for the woman. I forget her name. I'm so sorry. But she came to the rescue and found that. Because that put Richard right there. That put him right there. And the other question I have is, where was he if he wasn't there? If some of you guys can tell me where he was during that time, what witnesses he has, who can stand up and say that they saw him during that time and hung out with him during that time, or maybe finished that six-pack with him during that time. I'd like to know that, because I've not heard that. I've heard he's innocent, but I'm not seeing any facts to show that he was not involved. I'm just not seeing them. I'm hearing about Odinist, and I'm hearing about this, and spit on bodies, and all this stuff and everything. The cops are responsible for following the evidence, and up in Delphi, that's exactly what they did. They weren't perfect. They made mistakes. Does that mean he's innocent? No. Mistakes are made all the time. Some you hear about, some you don't. Again, if the file was filed correctly, we wouldn't be worrying about all the money that was spent and, did the FBI get kicked out or not kicked out or whatever. And something I've heard that I have a bit of a hard time with, I heard the FBI came up with, the idea that this was a sacrificial, Odinistic kind of killing. I'll tell you why I have a problem with that, because they don't usually lean out like that. They don't usually put their necks out like that. I mean, that's quite a statement for somebody to come out and say that, okay? When we've never had any sacrificial murders up there before, or none after, for that matter, right? So I just don't believe they're the ones that originated that theory. I can see them saying, well, it's possible, okay? Because in an investigation like that, and people talking about a unique crime scene, I got news for you. All crime scenes are unique. They're all unique, all right? To one way or the other. But the bottom line, that the FBI would come out with a solid theory, this was sacrificial murder and the Odinites did it. And, I mean, I am not buying into that whatsoever. And of course, that can be my ignorance. Maybe I'm wrong. Like I said, a lot of this is allegations. But I believe this whole theory, and rumor control and conspiracy theories running abound have come from elsewhere. Certainly not from the FBI, and didn't start with the FBI. Bottom line, unfortunately, mistakes happen, and conspiracy theories run abound and run rampant. There's no question about it. I wonder if anyone has given any thought, if Richard Allen is let out of prison on a technicality, to the fact that they would have an admitted murderer, alcoholic, and sex addict back on the street. And remember, a technicality doesn't mean, that the person's not guilty. Because, it's one thing having a murder on the street. It's another thing having an alcoholic who can get drunk and go into a blackout and act out, or, a sex addict back on the street. All right. I mean, I think all this has to be taken into consideration. And those aren't my words. Richard Allen said he was a sex addict. Richard Allen says he was an alcoholic. And Richard Allen said he murdered Abby and Libby. Thank you all so much for your time today. I hope that helps in some way, because at some point, let's look at the families. Let's try and, in this misery. I'm not even going to talk about closure, because closure doesn't even exist. Okay, let's just try to, let the grief process take place. Because how can it really take place completely if this is constantly going on? I mean, I just don't know. So please have some understanding for the families and what they're going through. They lost their kids. They lost their kids. So until we talk again, great seeing you at Delphi. To all my followers and viewers, God bless you. Thank you so much. Appreciate you tuning in. Most importantly, stay on your toes out there. We live in a very violent world. And until we talk again, God bless and take care. Thank you.